Hello, welcome to the fourth episode of my knitting video podcast. You may notice a slight change of scenery, and this is because I've recently moved. As usual, I will talk about my finished objects, anything I currently have on my needles, and any yarn acquisitions and plans related to them that I have. I also just got a new microphone from my boyfriend, so do let me know if there's any improvement in the audio, if it's anything that I can fix. Let's start with what I'm wearing. This is the square neck camisole by Garn. I knitted it in knitting for olive merino in the colour purple unicorn. This is very much my kind of colour. I really feel comfortable in these sorts of muted lilac-y purples, and I think they really suit me and they make me really happy, and they give like a little pop of colour without being too bright. I sized down in this pattern. This was purely off of vibes because I knitted my twist loop top on the recommended size and I thought it was a little bit too big for me, so I thought I might just size down. This was not thought through at all. I just kind of thought it might be a bit better. I also didn't do a gauge swatch because I like living on the edge, and I just followed the pattern, knitted this on 3mm needles I believe, just as the pattern specifies. I think I might have knitted a bit more decreases on the waist, but I think I talk about it in my podcast that this is in the thumbnail, so you can check back on that one and you'll get a bit more info. I think I mentioned this previously in possibly my last episode, but I've noticed that the knitting for olive merino tends to shrink upwards, so lengthwise it shrinks but then widthwise it grows, and someone pointed out that it may be due to the rib. However, as I will show you further on in the video, I've knitted something in just stockinette in this yarn and the same thing happened. So with this object you can see a little bit that it has become a little bit wider than I would like it to be, so I probably should have opted for slightly more waist decreases, but I don't mind it too much. I also noticed that with the wear the straps become a little bit loose and they go like this and I have to adjust them, but as soon as I wash it and block it, even without pinning, it just shrinks back to its original state, and then as soon as I wear it for I don't know, 10 minutes, it goes to this state. So I'm not sure what that's about. I don't know what's going on with the knitting for olive merino, but it is a lovely yarn and I do love that it springs back to shape once you wash it, so I don't mind it too much. This top is just the perfect casual basic. I can just throw it on whenever I'm traveling, whenever I want to look pretty. I think I wore it clubbing once as well, so it's just perfect and super cute and I love it. My first finished object of the episode is this April cardigan by Petite Knit. This has been a long awaited project because I think I took about 3 months to finish it, and I talked about it in pretty much all of my episodes, but this is finally done now. It's finally off my needles. I knitted this lovely piece in Drops Flora in White Fog and Drops Kids Silk Mohair in the colour light beige. I'm quite sensitive to both alpaca, which the Drops Flora contains, and I'm also sensitive to mohair, or at least Drops mohair, because that's the only one I've tried out so far. So I was really worried that this is going to be super itchy. That's also why it took me a bit longer to finish, because I just wasn't sure if I was going to be able to wear it very much, so I thought I was kind of stalling casting this off. But I found out on Reddit that you can do a bath with conditioner for your mohair, and that's meant to soften it. So what I did is I washed and kind of rinsed my garment as normal, and then I filled the sink with some just normal water, not too hot, not too cold, and then added a random amount of conditioner, just a bit more than I would for my hair, maybe 1.5, 2 times the amount. It was purely vibes, and then stirred it around to mix it in, and then put my cardigan into that, and then I left it to soak for 15-20 minutes, and then rinsed it out I think a few times to get rid of any of the conditioner so that it didn't feel like it had any residue and just blocked it as usual. It gave it a bit more of a softened, silky feeling, and I definitely think it helped quite a bit because it was a lot harsher, like the mohair, before I did that, and now it feels very smooth. It's definitely still itchy, but I think it helped quite a lot. I noticed that the darker mohair colours are a bit more itchy than the lighter ones, because I've knitted something in like the lilac-y super light purple colour and it was absolutely fine. Like, it was still a bit itchy, but it was a lot softer than this one was, and now this is like very just silky. Yeah, I just use this conditioner, I use it for my hair as well, so if anyone's interested. I've also noticed with drops mohair that the more you wear it, the more it softens up and stops shedding the little fluff bits, and it just becomes a bit more pleasant on the skin. So that's exactly what happened with this one. I still find it a little bit itchy, but it's not super noticeable like whenever I wear it normally. But as soon as it gets a bit warmer, like if I walk into a room or like the heating cranks up on the train or something, I do have to take it off because it just becomes like unbearably itchy, and normally it's just like absolutely fine. It's definitely not something that I can just tolerate it against my skin and I have no feeling of, like with this merino, because like I can't feel it at all, but the drops mohair and the flora definitely do give me some sort of reaction, but it's not like bad. I don't get red or anything. I definitely think if it was like against my neck I would struggle a lot more. So again, with this project I also didn't knit a gauge swatch. That seems to be a thing that I tend to do, but I'm a tight knitter, and also I've knitted an April cardigan before in a slightly different yarn that I've not been wearing, just because it was like one of my first projects and it hasn't come out very good, and it was a little bit too small, so I knitted the size medium. I've heard that other people have had issues with this pattern coming out slightly on the smaller size anyway, and I thought I wouldn't really mind a slightly roomier cardigan. It's like the perfect basic. I really enjoy just throwing on over any outfit and just having like a nice little outer layer. It's the perfect gauge because it's really light and easy to carry around and just throw on, but it's just really drapey but nice and like covered by the mohair, so it really protects from a bit of like lighter wind. Main issue I have with this is probably the colour. I think I knitted it in a colour that's a little bit close to my skin tone. Still like a nice throw on layer, but I thought I'd mention that it's not the perfect combination for me. And even though I love how the marling like ended up looking, the fabric is really beautiful, but I think possibly the colour might have not been the perfect choice for me. So I followed the pattern pretty much exactly. The only modification I made, which as you can see is the double knitted button band, I ended up following Florence Miller's, or Handmade by Florence's, Ravelry notes, and just did pretty much what kind of the stitch counts and stuff what she did. And I also followed the tutorial for how to do the buttonholes of the step-by-step cardigan, because I thought that was a really good tutorial, and also ended up not having to do too many ends. Like I didn't have to weave in any ends for each buttonhole because you just continuously knit. I did 5 stitches from like the bottom, then I put the first stitch marker. Buttonhole is 4 stitches kind of long. When I did the buttonholes I didn't follow the tutorial exactly because I did 3 times front and back, so rather than I think 2 that is in the video. The buttons I bought originally for this cardigan, I think I showed in my last episode, ended up being a bit too small, so I had to go for these buttons that I ripped out of my other April cardigan that I definitely just won't wear ever again because it just didn't turn out so great. So I thought I might repurpose these, and I think they look super cute. They're just like these shell buttons. Some of them are a little bit yellow, which I'm not super happy about, but overall they give a really cool effect and they kind of blend in, but then you can see them pop in the light, which is really lovely. I think it works really, really well. I sewed on the bottom 2 buttons a bit too close together, which you can see a little bit when the cardigan is buttoned up, but I'm a bit too lazy to go and fix it, so I might just deal with it. Like, I don't find it bothers me too much. I might fix it at some point, but I don't think I will in the near future. In the last episode I was worried that it would be puckering around here, but I don't think it's really an issue, and it's come out really good. I really like the way it fits and the way it looks. The only issue I have with the fit is I think I don't do so well with raglans or maybe petite knit, because my shoulders are relatively broad and size large, I think, that I knit is great around my shoulders, maybe even slightly too small, but then in the body it's a little bit too big for me. Like, I look a little bit chunky in it because it's so roomy, and like around my bust it's good. So I'm not sure if it's the fit, if it's the fact that I sized up, maybe my gauge was a bit off, my body proportions, I'm not really sure, but I thought it would be worth mentioning. But I think my next cardigan would be a drop shoulder construction, so I'll see if that fits me a little bit better. I'm curious to see if it is my body proportions or if it's petite knit, or like what's the issue here. Either way, it is a really lovely piece. It's a lovely basic and I wear it all the time now. My next pretty much finished object is the basic boat neck tank by True Summer Knits, or Maddie. This is a test knit. I really loved this design and I really wanted to knit it, so I messaged Maddie and I was like, can I please test knit this? And she was like, absolutely. I've knitted the Mixture of Cami by Handmade by Florence, I think in the last episode actually. It features a boat neck and it's just like a sleeveless top with a mixed rib design on like all over the body. And Maddie posted a picture of a basic boat neck tank where it just has stockinette all over and it's just like the basic of basics, with this lovely boat neck and also I-cord edges. I'm really glad I got to test knit this. I believe the pattern will come out with a full YouTube tutorial and I think it will come out towards the end of September. Current possible release date is the 22nd of September, but don't quote me on that. There was 2 group chats. You had one chatty one and then one that was kind of more updates related. If you wanna apply for Maddie's future test knits, I would definitely recommend it. She's also really good with feedback. She really takes it on board and like talks you through and talks through any issues, helps people out with anything that they might need, so I'm really glad I participated in that. I haven't got it with me, but I knitted a tiny gauge swatch and I was slightly off gauge. Obviously I'm a tight knitter, so I was slightly tight. My gauge was like a bit small, so I had more stitches on the same amount of centimeters that was specified. I didn't think that would be too much of an issue because I wanted a slightly tighter fit than the pattern suggests. I wanted a little bit less ease. Maddie made this pattern so that it's not super tight fitting. Like, it is a negative ease, but I think it's got slightly less negative ease than you normally would have in a pattern this in a pattern like this. So I also went for the size small. I wasn't sure between size small and a medium because I usually do a medium and I wear medium sizes, but I thought my measurements fit the size small a bit better, and also I did want a really tight fit. This again is knitted in Knitting for Olive Merino, this time in colour Pearl Grey. And this is knitted on 2.75mm needles. I still followed the needle size specified in the pattern. Also, you do 2.5mm needles for the I-cord edges. Unfortunately, with this piece I ended up losing yarn chicken, so I had to have a little break from this project. I was waiting for some yarn because my lovely friend from Instagram, Knitlingua, decided that she will send me some of her leftover lamb grey Knitting for Olive Merino yarn, and we thought that was the same colour, but it ended up being slightly darker. This is the pearl grey and this is the lamb grey. When I was knitting towards the bottom of my folded hem, I started knitting in the lamb grey and I thought I would just do the I-cord edges with that as well, and I thought it wouldn't really be too visible, but when I knitted a few rows in it, it ended up looking a little bit wet. Like, you know, when you've got a grey fabric and then you wet it, it's slightly darker. So it just looked like that, and I didn't think it was a vibe. So I decided to just take the loss and order some more of the pearl grey from Oxford Yarn Store. The sun is coming out and it's really bothering me. I hope I'm not too, like, bright. This pattern also features a non-rolling I-cord edge. As you can see, my armholes are non-rolling, but my neckline is still slightly rolling. If you're knitting this pattern once it's come out, it shouldn't really be an issue if it's still rolling before you blocked it, because the blocking and pinning it down really helps, and it really fixed the armhole edges for me. I think I picked up slightly too many stitches around the neckline, so I will have to rip this out. I think I did 4 out of 5 for my mixed robe cami, and that worked really well, so I think I'll do the same thing for here. I knitted the folded hem, like just here I switched to 2.5mm needles, and then I knitted to here, purled, and then knitted in 2.5mm needles. And then when I was about to cast off, when I was casting off, I switched to 3mm needles because I really wanted it to be stretchy. And as I cast off, I was also knitting it on, so I was picking up stitches and then knitting them with the live stitches using the Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. So I added a yarn over in between each stitch that I had, which really helped with the stretch. And as you can see, it is like fully stretchy, and there is no issue of it like going over my head. The only issue I have is I think I missed a stitch somewhere, because like on this side it is perfectly straight, and on this side it like tilts to the side. So I started noticing it after a while, and I genuinely think it's just where I missed a stitch. I hope my microphone wasn't getting caught in this. I'm really sorry if it was. I think it's like the perfect, slightly professional looking basic, but it also can be dressed down, which is like the perfect clothing that I really enjoy wearing, just having something that can be dressed up or down depending on the occasion, and it's just very versatile and I really love it. Another almost finished object that I have is my Oslo hat by Petite Knit. This is actually the Oslo hat mohair edition, so I knitted it on 3mm needles just because I think Knits mentioned that this pattern has slightly more options for sizing, and I just wanted more sizes, so I went for this hat. I think it fits me relatively well-ish. Yeah, as you can see, the width is quite good, but I knitted the crown a bit too short, so I will have to rip it out, and that's why it's a almost finished object. This in sandnes garn, double Sunday, in the colour 1015, which is I think putty or kit, and it's just this really beautiful, slightly beigey, like off-white colour. I think it really suits my skin tone. For this one, again, I didn't end up doing a gauge swatch. I just knitted it on the 3mm needles specified in the pattern, and I think it came out maybe slightly tight. I didn't check my gauge, but I think around my head it fits. Certainly after blocking it's like fine. I think I'll wear it okay, but maybe I should have sized up to 3.5mm needles. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be too much of an issue, but definitely if I knit more of these as like presents, it will be good to size up a bit. I also ended up knitting the brim a little bit shorter, like this folded brim part, shorter than the pattern suggested. I think the pattern suggests 10, but I think my like forehead and this bit of my head is not super tall, so I thought it would just look a bit better, and I think it suits my like facial proportions a little bit more than it would on like 10 centimeters. I was also playing yarn chicken, so that kind of added to that and yeah, I made that decision. So as I mentioned, I started decreasing a little bit too early, but that is because I didn't want too much poof at the top. I just wanted it to have like maybe end here rather than like here on some like people's hats. And I was just like trying it on and I thought it would have been perfect, but obviously I didn't know how long this part was because like I didn't do a gauge swatch. I should have probably measured and seen approximately how long it would take, but I didn't do that, so I ended up with a hat that's too short. So I think I'll pick up stitches along here and then just rip to there, like just frog it, and then I'll knit maybe like 2-3 more centimeters and then start the decreases then, because I just wanted to be like over my ears, because currently it's just like this fisherman hat length and I really don't like it at the moment. It also doesn't cover my ears, so what is the point of a hat if it doesn't cover your ears? I only bought 2 balls of yarn. I'm not sure why I decided to do that, but I thought maybe it would be enough, especially that because that I'm not doing the poof. I still have this much left, which is a load of yarn. I think I can get out like quite a lot from this, so it shouldn't be an issue. I don't think yarn chicken will be too bad. Okay, last finished object for this video, and these are my chamomile socks by Yuka. These are finished, like I cast them off, but I haven't blocked them yet, so they're not like super pretty looking. I'll show them in like my next podcast so you can see them like how they look like without being all scrunched up. But I still wanted to talk about them because they are so pretty, and you know, you can never get too many socks. This is from the chamomile vanilla pattern sock set by Yuka. I knitted these in Regia Rosa Shine from the Trend Shine line of their yarns. It's just a typical 75, I think, wool and 25% polyamide blend, so it's not nylon but still a bit of plastic to keep them together a little bit better. I'm a bit scared to knit my socks in like non-nylon, non-plasticky yarn because people say they wear through them really quickly, and I've not worn through any of my socks with nylon, so I'm just going to trust the process and I'm going to have plasticky socks. As you can see, this yarn is slightly self-striping, so it's got a little bit of like variation in the colour. It's mostly pink, but it's got these like multicolored stripes, which I really enjoy. It's not really variegated and it's very subtle. It still comes across as mostly pink. It's got this beautiful colour variation that just looks almost holographic, like if holographic wasn't shiny. These are knitted toe up and have a modified short row heel. This is, I think, a Yuka original heel. You don't end up with any holes, and your socks, when they're flat, they kind of lay like this. I'm not sure what they will look like when they're blocked, but so far they just look like this. They just kind of don't have the kink in this bit. The Turkish cast on was really fun to do, and I really enjoyed not having like a load of stitches on my needles and just starting with like, I think 11 maybe, just like the normal amount, and then you just increase out, which is really fun. I really enjoyed that, and it was really fun to try out a slightly different sock construction. I ended up making these on 2.25mm needles. I think the pattern suggests 2mm, but I don't like knitting on 2mm needles. That was pretty much the main reason why I did it. I've noticed that it's a little bit harder to put on toe-up socks rather than top-down socks for me. I think my foot just gets stuck like in this part, and I have to shove my foot through, but once they're on, they fit absolutely fine. This sock is shorter than this one, and they have exactly one lace repeat of difference, because first I knitted this one and then I realised it's a bit too short, but I also couldn't be bothered to like rip back, so I knitted the second one like to the right length, and then I adjusted this part of the sock to match like when I'm wearing them. And this is entirely my fault because I didn't follow the kind of guide that Yuka always adds to like how long you need to knit the socks to. I was just going off pure vibes and I was trying them on, and normally it would work, but because of the heel it didn't, because it's got like a slightly different fit and a different length than gusset and heel flap would have. So it is entirely my fault because I went off of vibes and not maths. Yeah, definitely should calculate it next time rather than just guess, but I think I was on a plane or something. I was in the car, I really didn't want to do anything, so it's fine. As you can see, these have this beautiful chamomile floral design on the front of them, which I think I really enjoy. Kind of lacy socks. I much prefer them to like cabled socks, and I think I will really enjoy wearing these. They literally just look like petals of flowers, and then in between them you've got these braids, which are really easy to do actually, and at the back you've got the same braids. I wasn't sure if I was going to do them actually, but I ended up just following the pattern exactly, and I'm glad I did because it just adds a bit of interest to the back of the sock. I think they look super pretty. I also wanted to mention that on one of my socks I did the bind off suggested by Yuka, and then on the other one I ended up doing Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, which I prefer for toe up socks, and I actually didn't notice before that Yuka had like suggested bind offs. I think her bind off works really well for twisted rib or half twisted rib, but I opted for just normal rib at the top because I prefer the look of it on my socks, and that ended up being a little bit like it flares out quite a lot, and when I put these socks on you can see where it flares out, but the one with the Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, it looks like absolutely perfect. It really just cinches in perfectly. It's not so flared out. I don't think you can see too well because they're not blocked, but I'll see how they look after blocking. My first and main work in progress is this blouse number 1 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I'm going to try and not hold it for too long because the needles are really clanking about. So far I've got just below the body, and then I've got the first sleeve, well, the second sleeve finished, and then the first sleeve I'm redoing, but I'll talk about that more in a bit more detail in a second. I knitted 2 tiny swatches, and the first one I think I did on the suggested needle size and I was like way off gauge, I was way too tight. So then I ended up knitting a second swatch where I sized up to 5.5mm needles and I'm exactly on gauge, which is perfect. I still cast on using the suggested 4mm needles so that I get like a nice clean finish around the neckline, because I didn't think that the gauge would make a difference for a cast on, because you just cast on the needles rather than like your personal gauge, I suppose. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I think that's good logic there. The yarn I used is Tynn by Sandnes garn, and I used 2 strands held together as Candid Knit did for her blouse number 1, and I thought it looked absolutely beautiful. I copied the same colour that she used, which is 6032, I think, Hortense. Yes, it's like the hydrangea flower, which yeah is just like a lovely slightly muted blue. It's like still slightly bright, but I think it will suit me quite well. I was a bit worried about it when I first chose it, but I've tried on the top and it looks beautiful, and I think it will really suit me, so I'm really happy with my colour choice. As you can see on my gauge swatch, this yarn is just beautifully lustrous and is just buttery soft. It's really like slippery as well, not insanely slippery but quite, and I think it's actually mostly viscose, a bit of cotton and some linen, so it's not actually Tynn. I think the name is a little bit misleading, but I'm quite glad because I don't think I would enjoy linen quite as much, and this is really nice and it still should be quite breathable. I noticed that this yarn when knitted up looks quite round, and then when you block it it's nice and flat and like fills in the gaps, because I wasn't a massive fan of my swatches before I blocked them, but yeah, they look absolutely fine and I really love the fabric afterwards. Hopefully that happens to my final object as well. As I mentioned, my tension is very tight, so I benefit from knitting on metal needles, but I think if you're a loose knitter I would really recommend using wooden needles, because this yarn is quite slippery and it doesn't hurt my hands because of that, because I'm a tight knitter, so it doesn't really seem to be an issue for me, but I definitely think it would be if you are a loose knitter. Also, I would really not recommend center pulling this yarn because it is just a nightmare to like untangle, and I ended up just having so many tangles when I center pulled, and I spent so much time de-knotting this yarn that I just ended up like doing outer pull from like for my next balls of yarn, and yeah, just really wouldn't recommend. Because this is knitted on such massive needles, it goes by super fast, it just speeds by. But I ended up knitting the first sleeve and I finished it, and then I cast on the second sleeve, like got to the increase round, and then realised that on the first sleeve I actually read the pattern wrong and ended up increasing a bit too early, and I tried it on and I didn't really like the look of it, so on the second sleeve I ended up following the pattern exactly, and then I decided to rip out the first sleeve. So yeah, now I'm re-knitting that, and then I will continue knitting the body after I see how much yarn I've got left, because I think I should have a little bit more yarn from the second sleeve. Well, the first sleeve, I'm getting confused now. I think I should have some yarn left over just because there will be a smaller circumference of quite a long like knitted section. I'm currently playing a little bit of yarn chicken because I ordered 5 balls instead of 6 or 7, so I will have to divide the last ball into 2. I'll just wind it so that I can finish the body from like 1 ball, and I'll just knit for however long like I have the yarn left. I want this piece cropped anyway, so it shouldn't really be an issue, and I hope I don't need to buy any more yarn, but we'll see how that goes. My final half finished whip is the Kaisla socks by Rachel Coopy from the 52 Weeks of Socks book, volume 1. I already have one sock finished here, and I've literally cast on and knitted a few rows. I think I just started doing the lace repeat on this sock on the train home today because I've just come back home from my trip to Poland. I was just seeing my family and introducing my boyfriend to them, so that was really lovely, and I ended up knitting this like on the plane after I finished my chamomile socks, because I find that socks are just the perfect travel projects, especially on the plane, because you literally just have one ball of yarn and that you have to pack, and you get 2 socks and you get like loads of hours of knitting. The stitch count suggested for this, like these socks, is super large. It's like 72 stitches I think for the smaller size, and then the larger size is like 80 something stitches, which I thought was crazy. Like I usually end up knitting the middle or larger size, but yeah, that was a bit too many for me. So I sized down a needle size to 2.25mm needles from 2.5, which are suggested for this pattern, and I think they fit me quite well. They're like still like on the looser side, but they're not as roomy as they would be if I knitted them on 2.5mm needles. I think I really wouldn't have enjoyed the fit of them in like if I did. The yarn I used is Cascade Heritage in the colour Lunar Rock. This comes in a hank, like in a skein. It was really kindly wound by my boyfriend in the middle of the night when we were in Poland, because I wanted to knit on this sock the following morning, so he just wound it around my toothbrush case and he was just like sitting there and I was holding the yarn like this. So yeah, very entertaining. That took quite a while actually, and I think I'm starting to see why people enjoy having yarn winders, but I think this is the first yarn I ever had to wind, apart from this tynn line that I had to wind as I was like working on it. So I think I rewound it after I was like center pulling because it really annoyed me. It took quite a long time, but I think it's not really, there's no point in me buying a yarn winder just for this. As I mentioned, I cast this on pretty much straight after I finished my chamomile socks, and it was really lovely to go back to knitting top down socks. Like they just fly by, and I really enjoy this construction because I've just knit so many of these. They are definitely a lot more fiddly when you cast them on, but after they're just like, I know how to knit them, so I find them a lot easier to make. This is also my 3rd sock that I've made from the 52 Weeks of Sock book, and I found that all of these patterns are really poorly like written in terms of they're very confusing, and like the stitch counts are great, the like lace charts are great, but the actual explanations for how to do things aren't very clear, so I have to follow Florence's petal drop socks pattern for like any explanations. Like I remember vaguely how to knit top down socks, but I find it useful to just like look back and see how I'm actually meant to do things and what it's meant to look like. But these patterns just tell you do this, do that, but don't really explain like how you're meant to do it. It's very much paragraphs rather than like nicely separated. If you've never knit fancy socks before, I wouldn't recommend this book. The design on this sock really reminds me of like bamboo stems. I'm not sure if you kind of get what I mean, but just because of like these lacy holy bits. I also just really enjoy how they look. They're very simple and they're very fun and mindless and cozy to knit, so they really fly by as well. I think the chamomile socks really took me quite a while, just because I had to look at the pattern quite a lot, like the lace charts, and with these ones I just could knit them from memory quite easily. For the leg I knitted 1.5 chart repeats, where I think it says to do 2.5. I just thought it would be a little bit too long, but I think I probably should have done 2 instead of 1.5 because they're a bit shorter than I would like them to be. But I don't really mind that quite so much. They're still like just below my ankle, where I like them hitting around my ankle probably, which is just fine. Like they're still not shorties, so I still enjoyed that. And for the leg I didn't follow the pattern at all. I just knit for how long I thought would be long enough. I followed like the length of my longer chamomile sock and then just did a wedge toe. I'm not sure if you're meant to do a wedge toe or if it's like anything fancy, but I forgot to mention the chamomile socks have a rounded toe, if you're curious about the difference. I actually prefer the way this one fits me. I just think wedge toe suits my anatomy a little bit more, and I also really enjoy knitting these, so they are probably my preferred toe construction. But for toe up socks I don't really mind doing the rounded toe, so I'll still follow patterns. I think for the last pattern repeat I stopped halfway through, like this repeat. I think I did 2 instead of 3 of these holy bits, so I probably should have actually finished it because I'm missing maybe like 7mm for it to be like the perfect length. I'm not sure if I'll do that on the second sock, maybe, and I'll see which one fits me better, I suppose. But I don't think it's really going to be an issue. Like it's not super short, but like it just goes like that a little bit, and then the toe ends up being like a few millimeters shorter. I do tend to knit my socks too short, and it just seems to be like a recurring issue for me. The first one I have to mention is when I bought that regia yarn, I talked about how I really hope there is another colour of that pink yarn, because I love it and it's really beautiful, but I don't like pink that much, and I would love to knit it in like a grey or a blue. And Knit Lingua, who also sent me the grey lamb wool yarn for my basic boat neck tank, also said that if I order a yarn from a German store like to her house, she'll ship it to me. She sent me a link and they had like 3 balls left of this yarn, but I managed to find this regia trench shine in this beautiful grey blue, which has these like really pretty just strands where it's like purpley and pinkish, slightly greenish, and it's like slightly holographic. I think it will knit up absolutely beautifully. It's very similar to that pink yarn, but probably a bit more muted, which I think is just going to be perfect. I think this is going to be the perfect sock, and I'm so excited to knit it up. There's like a little, it shows you what it should look like, and it's a very tiny amount of variegation, like self-striping kind of thing. You can barely see it, but that's exactly what I wanted. Another yarn acquisition I have is, this was very cheap. Drops, I had like a sale on all websites like Wool Warehouse, Lind Hobby, like everywhere. All the alpaca yarns on of drops were just on a massive sale, so I think I got like this massive yarn quantity for maybe £20. Ordered this yarn, drops puna, in this light grey colour, which is very similar to my top actually, for the sporty knit skirt by Handmade by Florence. I've been in love with the pattern for so long and I've been really wanting to knit it, so when I saw this go on sale I just decided that I'm just gonna buy it. I'm not following my fall knitting plans at all at the moment, but I just really want the skirt and I think it will look so good, and maybe it will look cute as a set with this top as well, so I'm really excited to knit this. My final yarn acquisition is this beautiful yarn from Majo Garn. It's the fine merino in the colour sand. It's like this really pretty beige, greyish colour, which is a very me colour at the moment. I'm really like obsessed with these types of shades. I think it will look really pretty. I'm planning on holding that yarn with Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the colour limestone to get like a really pretty fluffy light fabric, and I'm going to knit the Maple wrap by Handmade by Florence again. And I've been looking at the pattern ever since it released, well, ever since she knitted it really. I've been really wanting to make this as well, and I decided to just order the yarn and make it. It's definitely like superwash feeling. It's like slightly stretchy and it's slightly shiny, so you can definitely tell it's superwash. I don't think they say it's superwash, but they say it's like treated, unshrinkable or something, so it basically means superwash, I think. Either way, the colour is really beautiful. I think it's sport weight rather than fingering weight, so that's why I went for it instead of Knitting for Olive, because I wasn't sure if I'd get the same gauge with Knitting for Olive. I messaged Florence and she said that it would be fine, but I'd get a lighter weight fabric and that's not really what I wanted, so I just opted for the same yarn she used, just colour sand, and then I was gonna do the Knitting for Olive merino because I'm quite sensitive to mohair, as I mentioned before, and a lot of people say that it's just a lot, like it's not itchy at all, so I definitely really want to try it out, and I think it'll be really good to try out with this super soft, absolutely not itchy at all merino, so it will definitely just be the mohair if it does itch, and then I will know that it either works or doesn't. This is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you're going to knit any of these patterns, what you've been up to, what you've been knitting, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.